Well, David Flint is the Emeritus Professor of Law at UTS, but he's also the National Convener of the Australians for Constitutional Monarchy. He has written powerfully and movingly about Prince Philip and his wife for Spectator Australia, opening by arguing that we owe the Queen and the late Prince Philip, quote, a debt greater than they would ever claim or we shall ever know. Professor Flint joins us. David Flint, thank you for your time. It's extraordinary, isn't it, in the light of what we've seen with Meghan Markle, that the Queen at 21 dedicated herself to a lifetime of service. You've called it leadership beyond politics. How else do you see it?
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that we are so fortunate to have an institution, a constitutional institution, which does provide leadership beyond politics. And so many Americans I know are so envious. They so regret that in the American system there's no similar body. The president, who always comes from one party, is always political. But in our system, we do have this extraordinary leadership beyond politics, which the prince so courageously carried out all of his life.
Yeah, and in 15 other realms, as you say, across the world as well, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I thought you made an outstanding point when you said the Crown is now constitutionally important, not for the power it wields, but for the power it denies others. Professor Flint, just amplify that very important point.
Well, until just after the War of Independence, the American War of Independence, the system in Britain was, as it was suggested, a disguised republic, because the king was the executive. The prime minister, the ministers had to have his confidence, and the king played, if he wished, a significant role in the administration of the country, a political role. And so he did in relation to the War of Independence, an unfortunate role. But after that came our Westminster system, where the government of the day is formed with the confidence of the lower house, the House of Commons, the House of Representatives. And this has lifted the monarchy. It has allowed the monarchy to evolve to a new and wonderful stage where there are some powers there which can only be exercised by the King, by the Queen, by the Governor-General, but they have to be exercised according to convention. And it requires the elected leaders of the government to actually go and ask, so that the Governor-General, the Queen, is satisfied that what she is advised to do is within her powers, and that there are no conditions on the exercise of that power which haven't been fulfilled. So we have a wonderful system which allows us to have this institution which did what the Queen has done all of her life, and she's done that with the support of her consort, yes, of Philip. And they've been able to do wonderful things, non-political things, like the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme.
Quite. I mean, would Prince Philip ever have imagined the outpouring of grief at his death? This is the man, I said, who gave up his own royal family to be part of the Windsors. But you and I know that in the death, of course, we should always remember that there are people watching us tonight who are grieving for loved ones and families who remain unknown. But at the same time, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that suddenly he has, as I said, a stature in death which he may never have imagined he enjoyed in life.
That is so true, and you only need to go back to the time of the award of the knighthood by Tony Abbott to see how that was used. They made up stories which were completely untrue, and they used that as a stepping stone to seize the prime ministership from Tony Abbott and to hand it to Malcolm Turnbull. But one of the most outrageous things they suggested was he had nothing to do with Australia. And he had everything to do with Australia.
Well, now, can I interrupt you there?
In our defence.
Can I interrupt you there, because I want to quote exactly what Professor Flint has written about that. When you wrote in The Spectator, the most hurtful, indeed grossly insulting lie was that Prince Philip had little connection with Australia. In fact, he risked his life for us, and that for several years, as a young Greek prince, immediately on topping his class at the Royal Naval College, Dartmouth. He volunteered for the Royal Navy, protecting our convoys, mentioned in dispatches, serving with Aussies in battles and later protecting our shores while attached to the Sydney and Manus-based British Pacific Fleet. After his naval career, you wrote, was cut short, he did our bidding regularly over almost 7 decades, visiting us well over 30 times and constantly drawing favourable international media attention to us. Now, Professor Flint, Tony Abbott knew all of that. He decided to honour him, as other countries had honoured him, with a knighthood. And as you said, this was used as an agenda to get rid of Abbott and put Turnbull in the Prime Ministership.
And the plotters had, they weren't at all backward in deciding to make about 10 lies, 10 untruths, to justify damning the knighthood as though it was something outrageous, as though it were a scandal never before done. Yep. There were about 70 countries in the world which had awarded the Duke their highest order. Some republics gave him a knighthood, for example, and all of these countries gave that. Nobody in any other country raised an eyebrow except to give approval.
Absolutely. What about his humour, though?
Most of them.
Sorry. I was going to ask you about his humour. You could go on for all night about his humour. He once said, when a man opens a car door for his wife, it's either a new car or a new wife. and a journalist, they were at a banquet at the Élysée Palace in the French president's palace in 2006, and the journalist asked Queen Elizabeth if she was enjoying her stay in Paris, to which the Duke interjected and said, a damn fool question. So, I mean, all of this, I mean, you mentioned the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme to help young people, 14 to 24-year-olds. I mean, on the 60th anniversary in 2016, about 8 million youths from 130 nations, 800,000 young Australians.
Yes, and some of them will say, we'd be in jail but for this award,
yes,
but for what was taught to us, the resilience, the way we could reach our own level, we could achieve things. We learned all these things from this award, the sort of things which we should be learning in school, and the sort of things that were taught to the Prince at Gordonstown, which he loved. Yes. He relished that very hard life where he could realise all of the sorts of ambitions that he wanted to, not only intellectual, but also physical and sporting and the very sense of service.
Just before you go,
which dominated his life.
Prince Harry's now arrived. He's apparently going to go to the funeral. Will royalties continue to be more important to him and Meghan Markle and the royal family?
I hope not. He has a wonderful record. What he did, for example, in relation to the Invictus Games, was a wonderful proposal. It was the sort of thing which his grandfather did in relation to the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme. He was going on a very good track, and I do hope that he and his wife will realise that he should return to that sense of service and get away from being a celebrity in Los Angeles, and don't ever do what he did with that ridiculous interview, washing your dirty linen in public, making allegations in public which should never be made. That was completely unacceptable. Absolutely. I hope he learns while he's there that this was the wrong thing to do, and he should return. 73
years of devotion to his wife, while she gave that devotion to the public, an enormous life. Perhaps one of the reasons his death, David Flint, has provoked such generous outpourings of sentiment is that they most probably don't make them, like the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip again. Douglas Murray wrote today, is it better to have the attitudes of the Duke of Edinburgh with his uncomplaining, keep buggering on attitude towards life, or is it better to have the emotional resilience of certain other people who have married into the royal family of late? He says, because according to that particular branch of the royal family, the point of life is to move to California, cash in your connections, make podcasts and do voiceovers for Netflix series. The Duchess of Sussex was 38 years old, says Douglas Murray, when she expounded that world view, an age by which Prince Philip had survived the revolutions of his childhood, the battles of World War II and years of public service. It's lovely stuff. Extraordinary human being. There'll be plenty said and justifiably between now and next Saturday. David, good to talk to you and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alan.
There is Professor David Flint.